Hello, I'd like to call to order the City of Bothell Planning Commission meeting. It is Wednesday, June the 7th, 2017 at 6 p.m. All commissioners are here and accounted for with the exceptions of Commissioners Cecil and Hampton, who are absent and excused. Non-agenda public comments. Does anybody have any? Seeing none, we have some minutes to approve. Does anybody need a chance to look at the minutes any longer? Okay. A motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the March 8th and March 15th Planning Commission Planning Commission minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes stand approved as written. Is there any new business this evening?
None.
No new business. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and jump into the initial public hearing on the housing strategy update for the City of Bothell. We're joined tonight by David Boyd from Community Development and Arthur Sullivan and Mike Stanger from a Regional Coalition for Housing, otherwise known as ARCH. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to either Dave or Arthur to do the introductions.
Thanks. I'll just do a quick intro. So this is the initial public hearing, but it follows on 6 study sessions meetings. So we've been at this for some time. And so in a real sense, it's a continuation of the work that we've been doing in those study sessions. I'd just like to again express my appreciation to Arthur and Mike from ARCH, who have been doing the lion's share of this work, and turn it over to Arthur.
Good evening, Commissioners. So the objective from the cover memo prepared by staff, the primary objectives for tonight is we started a first round of sort of voting, screening the matrix, the different strategies in the matrix by the 4 main category areas of sustainability, diversity and choice, or supply and choice, affordability, and special needs. And you sort of did your first cut at that. And so our objectives for tonight are to continue with that conversation. First, to go back and visit them each by those 4 subcategories. And then, depending on how that conversation goes, hopefully get to the point where we think at some point, take whatever rises to the top in each of the subcategories and have you talk through, of that collective whole, which ones of those feel like the top priority. So they'll all be shown as priorities potentially as we write up the document and for you to review. But we also seen that that list could be relatively long if there's some really high priority ones. In the course of doing that, we also want to make sure we're continuing to collect your comments and thoughts, both on the theme of why you think something is important and should be a priority for the city to look at, and also as the city, if that is a priority, what thoughts and considerations should be given just as sort of background when the work starts on those individual areas to be kept in mind when they're being looked at. So that's a primary objective. Another objective is we did also add into your packet for this material the notes from the senior focus group. So that was just provided as background information. And the matrix, if you recall, we've updated that, or Mike's done the work on it, where when we had the column about public comment and we shaded that's towards the right-hand side of the matrix. We have added in when the seniors made comments that seemed to. So that's been added into the matrix. Otherwise, the matrix is essentially the same as what was there at the last meeting. We just reattached it for you. And then we've also, which will come up later in the conversation, towards the middle of the packet, we attached what's called the monitoring list of issues, which I think probably at some point while we're talking about strategies, we'll talk a little bit more about that and how that might fit and complement into the work of doing the priority strategies. And finally, assuming we can get through all that, we have begun sort of outlining what we think is the format of the final product. So we've attached that, and we just wanted, our goal would be that, give you a chance to sort of look through that if you have any questions, but just to give you an idea of how we see packaging all the background information we've given you. And then the idea would be that whatever the priority strategies are, we'll still keep the full matrix in the document, but into the body of the report, we would highlight the priorities and talk about the whys and everything. And so that's why we want to make sure we're getting your comments tonight about why certain strategies you think are most relevant to Bothell and things along those lines. So that's the general overview of what we want to do tonight. Any questions about that before we sort of go back and start revisiting the matrix?
Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Okay, I guess continue on then, Arthur.
Okay, so what we thought we would try to do here tonight is, as needed, give you the chance to, especially in categories C and D, and I assume we have a similar thing for D as well. Right, and yes, do you have A ready? Or
Well,
not?
the question
Right, okay.
with A.
Right. Is that for some of these, you said might need more work and might need more voting, so we tried to set up a way that you could come up and do voting right up on the board here. So we'll come back to that as we go. The other is we are going to does everyone have the stickies? We're going to give you all sticky pads again, and the purpose of that is while you're talking or while you're thinking, if there are, remember the points I made about certain strategies, why you think they're important or considerations, say them out loud, but also write them down on your stickies for each one, and then we'll start sticking those up on here too. So that when we leave here, we'll make sure we're documenting your conversation as well. So we're hoping you can help us a little bit. So that as you make your points, after you make them, you might want to just jot them down, one, per strategy. You don't have to do one for every strategy, but if there's certain things you want to have as points for us to remember, after you make the point, when we're in that section, you'll be able to either hand it in or put it up on here so that we're collecting all of the comments and stuff, okay? So that when we're writing the report, we'll make sure we haven't forgotten anything. So that's why we're handing out the stickies to you now, so you can sort of make your little points and stuff as we go. So the first one is, and we haven't done a chart for this, but this is section A. And if you go to the attachment 1, what we did in attachment 1 is all this did was summarize. We didn't put all the text in for each of the strategies, but we put the strategy number. So if you use the full matrix, it might even help you to rip these 2 pages out and be able to refer back to the text in the full matrix in your packet. But this is the one on neighborhood vitality, and there were a total of 8. And what we've done on this sheet is for each is to tally your votes from the last meeting. So on neighborhood vitality, there seemed to be a little more clarity in your voting. So we haven't, this one feels like you might be able to just talk through how you feel about this section, and if you have more ideas you want to add or something feels missing. What we also did do is, if you recall from the matrix, most of the main strategies have several bullets under examples. What we did in this summary chart is if you voted on a specific example, we've included that bullet for that example. Okay, so it doesn't mean necessarily the others are going away. We just wanted to make sure you would see where the votes landed, and when they were more precise on examples, we have highlighted that here. So for vitality, you're the ones, we sort of do it, we kind of put a dark line in where we thought might, from a pure voting point of view, what might feel like a cut point for those that are rising to the top in this category. And you'll notice that for 3 of these 4, there were specific items called out or examples called out for A2 around PUD and clustering, for housing repair under preserve existing housing stock, and for 7, PED and transit improvements. So at this point, I sort of want to open it up to the group to see how this feels relative to the strategies for this area.
Any commissioners have any comments?
Are you wanting to know what bubbles up as the most
Yes.
significant out of what you chose?
Yes. Or no, for this one, I think we're at a point, if you had four would be okay.
Okay.
At this stage, to have is sort of percolating to the top. And yeah, so at this point, we're trying to get the ones that percolate to the top. And on this one, we're saying your voting sort of gives you a potential result, more so than the other ones where the voting was closer and there was more to choose from.
Okay.
So the question is, and if you do like, A, do you like the way it is here? If not, what would you change? And if you like particular ones, tell us why you like, what really sticks out for you, why you like them.
Okay, well, so when I looked at these, I appreciated ranking them
Right.
and sorting them the way you did. For me, the two pieces that directly focus in on most significantly for affordable housing, and I could be missing a piece on this, but the pieces that look like they most directly focus in on affordable housing is A2, the PUD clustering, and A5, the housing repair and preservation. The other pieces feel like those can be tucked into other focuses of the city. Those two pieces stood out as being most directly impactful for affordable housing.
All right? And just keep in mind, this is your overall housing strategy, but if I'm hearing you right, you're saying this has the added benefit of also helping to potentially address affordability issues. Right? Okay.
I like this exactly the way it is.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to comment?
Just quick clarification on the grayed out areas. Are they going to be removed, or they just indicated that it wasn't a priority?
They will not be, we are not proposing to remove anything unless you, because then this would be in the appendix, the full matrix.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Yeah, I'm with Commissioner Clark on this. I kind of think we had all the commissioners, I believe, that night, and we all voted, and it looks like we have a very definite 4, and so I'm ready to go ahead and move ahead on this portion.
Okay,
Okay?
Great.
I'm seeing
Now we
seeing
can
that's
do the
okay. We go up to B then.
right. Do we have a thing for B? No. Okay, so B, you also have a summary chart for, and this one gets a little more complicated because there's more to choose from, so you get a little more watered down. And this is going to be section C more. Okay, so did you have one for A and one for A? I did. If you could just write down the policy number, like A2 or whatever it is, and then we'll just collect that.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. And we'll and hold it because we might use that a little bit later. So for B, you'll see that's also on that same page, and there you're a little more spread out, as you can see, not quite as clear a split on your voting. And in fact, I think at the last meeting, you had said you might want it to, well, we'll let you talk it through, but some of your options were, what if we got to add another vote or something? How would that help us sort it out? And so either talking it through or whatever, we need to do the same conversation on this section here. And then the other, and if I could go back to the first page right now, just to clarify, or the first section to clarify something, which is that in presenting these, our sense would be that when we look at A2, A1, A5, and A7, we're saying that in general, that overall category strategy, including all its examples, are relevant or potentially relevant. And that, but when we talk about A5 and A2 and A7, we would call out in particular that example which got a vote. We wouldn't undo the others, but we would call out that there was one during the conversation. This is one of the examples that was particularly called out. Does that make sense? The reason I bring that up, okay, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, the reason I bring that up is that might, just so that you know, one of your options is, especially when we get on the other pages, you may like a strategy, but you don't like one of the examples that's there. You're like, okay, I like 4 of the examples, but I don't like the third one. If you want, that's important to talk about tonight. If you vote for a strategy, we're assuming all the examples are good unless you call it out and say, I like this one, but I don't like this one, or that example, or yes, I do like this example to call out. But if there's any examples that you feel are not relevant to Bothell, we need to call it out. So that would get taken potentially off the list as an example.
The ones that are denotated in blue.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Okay? So I just want to put that clarification out there. Okay, so housing choice and supply. Thoughts and comments, again, we just arbitrarily, where the vote count was, we went down 5 and drew a line, and there was a little bit of a gap in points at that point. So let's open it up.
I'm sorry, I'm full of opinions tonight. So.
This is the night for opinions. This is
Okay,
what we want.
okay. So the line drawn below B12, I'm looking at the topics that we're hitting, and and it's going through a filter of what can we be most impactful for as soon as humanly possible. And I look at B12 condominiums, and I think we're kind of hamstrung on that. Probably the most that the city can do is lobby Olympia for changes that will expedite how condominiums go in. But then I look down at manufactured housing communities, and I think, could we move that forward a little faster than the changes in the condominiums? And if we can, I'd like to see manufactured housing communities get a little extra emphasis.
This is your group's chart now. We're just pointing out, and I'm glad you brought that up. So.
And that's the sum total of my opinion on that.
And I think this is why we were saying this was one in which, because of how the voting worked, that the voting might not be the solution exactly. So.
Got it.
I guess I would lobby for B2 to be above the line. I thought it was important, even though the Canyon Park Master Plan project is on the calendar for this year, and that's going to tend to those issues in that area. It's something I think the city can regularly look at of where density and should be, if it should be increased, and where housing availability is based upon topography, better traffic, areas that support higher loads of traffic and closer to the interstate and things like that. So I guess and that's something within the city's planning power to look at different sub areas and make adjustments and have that be one of its main tools. So those are the ones I voted for. So.
I voted for the other one below the line, B4. So I sort of looked at this list, and when we look at some of the top vote getters, I don't disagree with any of them. But B10, for example, I feel like we have that one fairly well baked and a plan in place to address ADUs within the city of Bothell. Not saying that it should be de-emphasized, but I like B4 for the fact that it brings something new to the table, helps focus density where it makes the most sense, provides an incentive for offsetting, setting aside land for TDRs. So that's why I went with B4. Like I said, I don't disagree with anything above the line. I just think we've talked about all of them before. Below the line, this was such a big, broad category. I think they all have some merit.
Can I just clarify? When you're talking B4, are you talking specifically about the transfer of development rights?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think the whole section that's just the one specifically I voted for. I think the whole section has some merit, though.
So let me, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you had anything here?
Yeah,
No, you good. And then I guess these are very interesting discussions. It'll be interesting to see where we go with this. it's hard when there's, we're missing 2 commissioners because they were here and we voted, and these ones are definitely all above, these 5 definitely rated higher above the line. Not saying we can't adjust it, but I will have to agree, I think, with, since it's one of the ones down near the bottom, I guess, is on the condominiums front. I mean, it does sound like it'd be worth the while of the city to continue efforts to look into that issue, but I don't know if it makes the top, 4 for me. I'm more okay with the others that are there, but I'm open to discussions on one below it. But it is hard. It is hard when we don't have 2 of the commissioners here to start changing around how we want to move forward. But
And do keep in mind, there will be the next meeting, and you can still keep having that conversation, so.
I agree with, excuse me, Chair Vliet on reorganizing this. I mean, I think we went through a pretty detailed review last time. A couple of questions. David, I wonder if you could answer under B10 accessory dwelling units. It talks about setting a goal for ADUs, e.g. 5% of single-family lots within 10 years. Any idea what that number would be if we were to achieve that? How many ADUs would we have?
I don't know if,
We can, and whether or not we have it right at our fingertips, but we have that number.
Okay. I'd love to see it, maybe again for a
Right.
future meeting.
We have a chart on the needs, in our needs analysis, where we showed the rate of ADUs per every city. So doing a little bit of math, we can tell you what that
Okay.
number is.
I guess for me, ADUs are important because I think it's kind of the low-hanging fruit, possibly as far as affordable housing is concerned. So I think that deserves to be there. I think that's a very important aspect of this. I'm glad to see it ranked highly. Condominiums, I think, it's a long overlooked topic. We've been dealing with this issues with the condominium law in the state of Washington for a long, long time, and I think it deserves to be there if for no other reason that we send the message that it is a critical issue, and that it may not take a lot of effort on our part to push that forward, or there may not be a lot to do, but I think having it on the list and having it as a high priority sends a strong message, because I think there really are some issues with the Condominium Act that need to be addressed and would benefit us in a lot of ways, not just, and some of it from an affordable housing standpoint. I do agree with the sub-area planning comment. I do think that that's important to have possibly above the line. Is the line that we're creating here kind of intended to be a in or out sort of thing in terms of prioritization? Is that?
We're trying to get to a manageable work program over the next 2 to 3 years for the city. So we don't want to list it so long that it's just not realistic. Now, you might, and this is where maybe between this meeting and next meeting, see how, you're like, hey, we like these. If a couple of them feel like your role is a little lighter, then maybe it's okay to have a few more. So I think to some extent, we might need to, as staff, sort of see where you're going and see if that feels, how manageable that is,
Okay.
as part of a final conversation to help wrap this up. So I would tend to agree, your point about sending a message, so it's not a lot of work, but it might send a message that it's important. But we can note that kind of stuff in the final report, like, okay, yeah, we might have 6 on this one, but 2 of them are, these are the reasons why. Okay. I think, so along those lines, to the comment about the sub-area plan, the example under the sub-area plan is related to Canyon Park. Well, that's now. So if you don't prioritize it, you're sort of sending the message that looking at housing issues within Canyon Park, including maybe affordability, isn't that important. Okay, so because now is when it's happening. And so there, it's already on the work program, okay, kind of thing. So those are where, that's where sort of the timeliness can come in. On ADUs, to your comment on ADUs, you're right, you did a code update recently. But if you go to, so the question is, what I was going to say, remember I said we're going to bring up monitoring at some point? Okay. If that's all ADUs was about, was your local regulation, say, oh, maybe that's a good candidate to put on the monitoring list rather than necessarily priority, because you've kind of done the work recently, but you want to watch to see what, it's important enough that you're saying, let's watch the results. And so the solution for some of these might be to move them to monitor. Now, ADUs is a little more complicated because when you look at the examples, and maybe you can point this out with ADUs, is that for ADUs, which is number, where are we? B10.
10.
Your examples include things like is setting the goal, which, okay, you can set a goal and watch and see what you do, but it says design requirements, no separate utility hookups. Now, that's not a code issue, but if that's your practice, then that, it's not necessarily going to be a commission issue. It would be a city issue. Maybe looking at clemency for undocumented ADUs. I'm not sure if we did that and stuff, that would be more of a code issue. But increase public information. That's something completely different than your code. So ADUs branched out into some areas other than just code. So again, that might be noted, which is if you do ADUs, we want you to focus on more the implementation side and not so much the code because we just did the code. So that's an area where that might help make that a little more manageable. And especially on the education and outreach, the cities did that collectively about 12 years ago or so. All the cities worked together on a marketing campaign. And so, and everyone's doing housing strategies, and ADUs is sort of percolating to the top again. So it might mean that this might be something that the cities work on together, and it's not just every city doing it on its own. So, so for ADUs, that might be some ways to think about how do you want to talk about it, or think about where you want to rank it, or how to rank it and stuff. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess I'm still kind of in the middle of my comments, or actually toward the end, but as far as ADUs are concerned, I think monitoring is a critical part of this, but I also think that we need to put an emphasis on that, I think particularly as it relates to affordable housing, and look for ways to encourage homeowners, existing homeowners, to embrace the idea of ADUs in a way that meets the code and is done legally and does help us fulfill that affordable housing requirement. I think that's to me, again, I think it seems to be low-hanging fruit from that standpoint. So I would very much feel strongly about keeping that in the active, high priority for us. And that's about all I have on this one. I would be in favor of leaving the top 5 where they are, and I think maybe sub-area planning being moved up a little bit, maybe possibly added to that.
One thing I should have noticed it before, but so B6 does encapsulate B10. I appreciate your wanting to make it stand out on its own, and I think that's important because I also think it, like Vice Chair Clark says, that the ADUs are potentially a very exciting low-hanging fruit for addressing a lot of the affordable housing needs. So I think they're just kind of interesting ways to develop anyway, or to redevelop. We could.
I have a note that we were going to delete ADUs from B6 last meeting.
Okay. I guess maybe we were going to remove ADUs from B6, and then since they're their own standalone category, is that what you recall?
I have a note in my last time.
Okay.
Remembering that too,
Yeah, we sort of have a double up on clustering too. That B6 and A2 both have references to clustering.
Yes.
Okay. So, Arthur, it seemed like you've done this with many other communities. When you get to a situation like this where we have these certain priorities, and then as you were speaking to, as well as a couple of the commissioners who are here tonight, 2 of the 5 talked to the, I believe it was the B4, or no, it was B2. I think it was Commissioner Wickwire and Clark that spoke to B2. What have you, what have you found as a successful way of going about this on narrowing it down to a manageable? I think that 4 number's while it's just a kind of arbitrary number, I think it's a fair one. I don't know, because nothing's going to go off the list. It's just going to, we have to rein it in at some point to be able to move forward efficiently.
Right. So I think, I don't know, probably different ways people get to their places where they want to be. One thought is, at this point, it might be worth not, you mentioned B2. B9 is manufactured housing, and I'm trying to see if you have land use provisions for it, but let's see, I'm trying to see what the examples were under preservation for affordable housing, to see if manufactured housing got called out there as a subcategory.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Modular homes, are we considering that part of manufactured housing?
When you say modular home, you mean
Like where you come in with prefab,
okay.
yeah, pieces that are laid, not just what we would consider mobile homes, but,
Yep,
But-
I understand.
yeah. Is that falling under our, because I think of that as manufactured housing. Is that,
Yes, I think it would be.
okay.
Yeah.
So if so, that would be adding, I think that doesn't feel like it's called out in B9 right now. And I'm trying to see whether or not it feels like there's another strategy under diversity that calls that out per se.
Would you want to list it under B6?
Well, that's.
I think that might make sense, because B9 really has to do with the manufactured housing communities and really is focused on our mobile home park overlay, whereas B6 has room for a variety of flexible or innovative housing types, including potentially tiny homes. We refer to cottages, but I just got a call today about an inquiry about tiny homes and realized there's a bit of a code impediment to doing small lot homes in certain zones. So that might be a good place to add, or 2 good things to add to that innovative housing category.
So just one more quick question about our process. The way I would see this going is anything above the line. In our matrix, we have the 2011 priority. That'd be replaced with 2017. Anything above the line would most likely be high priority. The middle section would be medium, and then the grayed out section would be low. And then council would receive the matrix and decide their work plan on what they want to study, either accepting our recommendations, what we've put together, along with feedback from the community. Is that what everyone's kind of gathering?
Essentially, yes, that's how it could proceed, yes.
So do we need to narrow, would you suggest narrowing it down to 4?
What I'm
Or just leaving
trying,
it as-
what I was going to do at
'Cause
this
we could vote on.
moment is see whether or not trying to show relative, in this one, it might be interesting for the moment to sort of rank them. And in other words, if you want to move the line down, are they all equal, or are some more strong than, are there some of these that are more, in other words, yeah, we'll move the line down, but is there some relative ranking, and does the relative, in other words, if you assume these were in order, would you change the order? Or would you just move the line? Does that make
Can we have time to think about it?
Yeah,
Like, until we meet again on this, on the
sure.
ranking?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're here to help you get to where you need to get to, so.
Okay. I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of just, since you gave us a kind of a goal of getting it down to 4, I think it might be appropriate to try to do that tonight, but I don't know. I mean, maybe we can just hold off on it until we have the other commissioners, but Is there any other feelings up here on doing that? Because I feel like we could just vote right now. We could just write it on a sticky note and you guys could tabulate it and go, those are the 4 in the order. Could we kind of do that again or not? Or is it without the other 2 people? Is that kind of?
What's the reason for limiting it to 4?
That was just the request at the beginning of I guess it's from Dave. It was just a, yeah.
I think maybe we ought to be potentially looking at how much work is involved with each of these, opposed to limiting it to a specific number. Again, the condominium thing, I think, I'd like to make sure that doesn't fall off, and maybe where I'm at right now is I'm fine with those 5, with the condominiums just being kind of a statement, and whatever assistance we can lend to whoever it is that's pushing that issue at the state level.
And
Okay.
so, so I'm not, we weren't, did we always draw the line at 4? No. It was more just looking at voting. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here too is you have a public hearing tonight, you'll have another public hearing, at the next meeting. I think what would be nice is for the public to have a sense of where you're heading, so that you potentially might get write-ins or people coming in to testify, knowing where you're kind of leaning. So to have it, I think that's one main reason for trying to hone in more tonight, so that you get a sense. And so I would be relatively comfortable with the idea, because of the point about workload. I think it would be nice to, I think I was leaning towards, tell me if this order is right.
Right.
Or tell us if the order feels right, or if we should jigger or if you had to, knowing that, things further up the list might be looked at, the first year, and things a little further down the list might be out a little bit. And so with sub-area, again, and I'll put out there for sub-area planning, the subcategory of that is Canyon Park.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine withdrawing my request for B2 to be moved up. The reality is sub-area planning will drive itself if some big need arrives, and it's a kind of generic category, and I'm fine with the 5, and I'm actually fine with the order. Of the 3 I picked in the top 5, they're in the order that I picked them. So I'm fine with how it is right now.
I'm also okay with the order of those 5.
I'm okay with the order of the 5 and the several below it, so I'm good with that.
For both neighborhood vitality and housing choice and supply, I like the rankings that you've got here. One kind of leads into the next.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm fine on both. I would move transit-oriented development above the streamlined procedures and regulations, but I think they're both very important, so I'm good with leaving it as is.
And the streamlining and procedures one, this is an area in which the city is doing a lot of work right now. And so this is almost one, this is maybe the better example of something that could be moved to monitoring. Because the city is just now completing a very extensive process that gets at many of the things that are in V8. But it's, like you say, to acknowledge it's important, if you look at this is now a good time to turn to the monitoring matrix, and you'll see that, and that's, like I said, that's on about page 20, it's right after the full legal size matrix. And if you look at that, this is the first page and the top of the second page are all things that you currently had last go round, okay? And we think for the most part, most of those are general and they're relevant and they're important things to do. Now you'll notice F7 is essentially a monitor, it is a monitor thing that would almost be watch the things, you've got 3 different areas. You got fees, you got land use code, and you got administrative procedures, all of which are being looked at right now. That you could call this issue out through monitoring by saying, and I'd actually put it under number 2, if you look at the next page, which is there you're acknowledging something that the city has worked on recently. There's nothing under there right now. What we're maybe suggesting is you take F7 and move it to this subsection 2 of the monitoring, because that's a way of calling out, we did work on it, but it's so important, we want to make sure we're watching it and we're on top of it. So that may be a way to deal with that particular strategy.
So it would still exist in that 5 in the matrix, but it would also be on monitoring, or it'd be
So
taken out?
what we're saying is, we would probably, in the text, say, this was a really important topic, but it doesn't show up as a strategy because of all the work the city is working on right now that will be wrapped up. But when we do monitoring, we will call out there that that work has been done, but the commission feels it's very important that we don't just, oh, we did it, we're done. Okay?
I would be okay with that. I don't know how the other commissioners feel with regards to taking it out of the housing choice and supply and moving it over to monitoring. That was your suggestion, Arthur?
Yes.
Okay.
And put it in under subsection 2 so that you're calling out, this is something we worked on, but we want to watch it to make sure it's working.
On the streamlined procedures and regulations. So moving B8
Yes.
into the monitoring phase, the second part on second page of attachment 3.
I'm fine with that.
You okay? Seems like the majority of the people up here are okay with doing that, so,
Okay.
but
All right, and again, you'll see it when it's, when we come back, but.
it doesn't lose its emphasis, it's just that it's already
Right.
going. Okay. Great. Okay, anybody else have any comments on, if not, we'll move on to the next housing affordability portion?
Okay. This is the one where you said, we probably need to vote some more or something, because as you can see, the voting was really spread out, and a lot of things got votes. Some think a number didn't, but a lot of things did get votes. And what we have up here is everything that received a vote. So when you look at the summary chart, these are all the ones that are not shaded. And then there's still shaded ones that we did not put up here. So this was one where I think you guys said, we'll probably need to do another round of voting to get a little more clarity. And so the first question is, would you like to do that versus just talking it through? Take a few minutes and do some type of voting approach. And that's the first question.
Yeah, I guess let's, I'd like to,
Just a point
ahead.
for discussion, maybe, looking at C15, because we do have discussion for seniors. So for C15, do we have any other points that are areas that specifically address family housing in our discussion? Nothing's springing to mind that's in our top categories of housing, affordable housing for families. If it's not in our top 4, I would sure like to move it up in something that's being considered in the near future versus the far future.
so, and I think mine's the vote on surplus public land. I know there's some opportunities maybe with that, with regards to, since it's publicly owned land, it's a little easier for the city to designate it as such and make it kind of put a stamp of it of an affordable component. And I believe there are some, near the downtown corridor. So that's something I think might be of interest.
Right. And just to clarify, when you look at the examples for it's almost like we should put a slash in here. We also included, maybe it's called nonprofit-owned land, because that's where the faith communities properties also was one of the examples. and is actually an area we've done just as much. We've funded as many projects in the last few years on property owned by faith communities as we have on surplus public property the last couple of years. So that has been more and more of an area of emphasis and opportunity. So it includes both of those. Just point that out. So it sounds like are you trying to talk your way through this one and not vote?
Well, I was just want to see if any other commissioners had anything else. Yeah.
One of the reasons I think we were so spread out is there's not a silver bullet solution to the issue in the region or within Bothell. Some, like Commissioner Clark's point, some of the low-hanging fruit, like with ADUs, that's something we've already attacked. And we've talked about affordable housing with capacity increases at Nike Hill with a rezone. And that might be a good avenue to incorporate some affordable housing. It's hard to emphasize one proposed section over another because they're all pretty high arching goals that I think the city needs to address, but we don't really have a plan in place that we could go and attack. I don't feel like anyway with certain elements in this section.
So another option, I guess, would be for, we just jump in if anybody else has any other comments as they're looking through this. But I mean, we could try to vote on this again. This is the one that we had commented on, or that maybe there was a comment or two that said we'd like an additional vote on it to maybe kind of narrow it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with going through that process if anybody else wanted to. If it would,
I think one reason we heard that and we think it makes sense is it's a way to make sure everybody's voice is being seen, or perspective. So I think that's one thing we found very helpful throughout this process is when we ask you to do that, everybody can see kind of everyone else's perspective a little bit when you do that. It's just sort of a quick, and then talk from that.
So would we be voting for the top three again, or are you thinking more than that?
I think that, well, that's what I was going to say. Okay, now how do you want to handle this? So everybody was given 3 the last time, right?
Mhm.
Right. So everyone had 3. Now the first question I want to ask is, there are a half a dozen that are shaded here that got no votes. And so the question would be, should any of those be considered for voting, or that looks like, in terms of prioritization for the state, for the city, that those would be lower? And the one comment, no, never mind.
It seems like we could pair those off to me and leave them kind of shaded and exclude them from the voting. That might make the rest of the result a little more
Yeah.
meaningful.
yeah, because I think with only 5 of us here, with all those, I don't even know if hopefully our voting will kind of tip us over one way or the other, and then that's why it's a good time for people to give comments about certain topics that might kind of draw in some other commissioners.
Right. And
I guess I'm happy to vote. When I initially was reading through this, I thought the 5 items that had multiple votes, so extending that line through C2 and C4 should be the high priority. Everything else medium, and the lower items low priority. But if you need more clarity, we can try to vote again.
so this is going to your point that why there wasn't consensus, because there's no silver bullet. And it is probably one of the bigger challenge areas, right? It's where I spend a lot of my time, because that's where the biggest challenges are.
That would be my
Try to
recommendation.
help. So a question I guess I have is, part of what could be done here is that, and I guess I'm sort of leaning towards some more voting, because now that you've seen this, and I'm kind of curious to see what filters out. And it might filter out the same, but the other thing you might want to consider doing for this topic area is that your first cut is broader, so that you're mentioning there are more areas, and to some degree, sometimes with affordability, you're not always given the choice of when to work on an issue. It's because something's there. So like the rezones, if you're doing a rezone, you either do it then or you don't, you know? And you don't know how many rezones there might be in a course of time. But you're saying this is a topic area where we could make an impact. So some of these might be explicit, we want to try to make them happen, but others are things like, hey, we've got to keep our eyes open here because they still could be helpful, and depending on the circumstance, which we can't totally predict, we want to acknowledge they could be important. So this is one where you might want to almost have your sort of 4 or 5 hard line, but you still may want, maybe not all of these that are lit here, but something maybe a little bit longer to sort of say, these are areas, we're not quite sure, but we've heard enough about them that they could be relevant for the work we're doing.
I'm comfortable with voting again. I don't know what the other commissioners feel like, but I'm kind of thinking we should leave the top ones alone. I don't know, since, the whole commission voted on those, and those definitely did rise to the top by themselves, but, and then how would you say, how many, then we vote on,
So vote on the middle section more to see which ones, help sort those out. In other words, you're saying the first 3 look solid, but let's think through C2 through C14. That's not based on this list. And vote on those and see if that helps sorts those out a little bit more.
so should we just write those down on one and give them to you, or put them up on the board?
Well, we just,
Do you want them ranked?
Let's do 3.
First,
we
second,
brought dots
third?
for you.
I'm thinking, Commissioner Clark, I'm thinking 3 votes for each of us.
Okay?
Do you want them ranked, or do you just want them to all have equal weight? Our choices.
If you want to put a 1, a 2, and a 3 on your dots, go right ahead. In other words, we're going to give you dots.
Oh.
And if you want to write a 1, 2, and 3, we can do that.
Perfect.
And then what we'll do is, what I think I'm hearing you say is, we're going to take, you're not going to vote, we're going to, these here, the first 3, because these are the top vote getter ones. So we've done these in the same order that they're on the summary list.
Got it.
So we'll just fold these over or something, so you don't make that mistake.
So we're going to put a sticky note on,
We're going to give you dots.
dots, okay.
Yeah, we got
And we could number those dots if we'd like.
And you can number the dots if you want. And we're noting your color. No, just kidding.
Thanks.
And we have a 1, 2, and a 3, correct?
Yes, if you want, yes.
The way we did it last time, if they weren't numbered in priority order, we gave them each 2 points. Otherwise, number 1 got 3, number 2 got 2, and number 3 got 1. So either way, you would each get 6 points.
Okay. You made it optional. That's true. Right. Yep, yep. Good point.
And while you're voting, I just wanted to make a statement. We do have some public here, and at some point we should find a good place to break and invite any public comment. Perhaps after we're done going through this first pass through the 4 areas.
Sounds good.
Another thing I'd like to remind you about is if you have comments that you wanted to put on the Post-it notes, you can put those right up here.
Oh, yeah. Did he do it? Really? Huh. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Is everyone done? Okay. Still a little, well, one that got 3, and it got 2 firsts and a third, was affordable family housing. Okay, then we have another one that got a 1 vote, are voluntary incentives. Now, you do have already above the line for affordability is you have affordable housing with capacity increases. So that could very easily, they're very related, okay? And I know the council has expressed interest in sort of understanding both. So that might be a nice one here to sort of combine a little bit with C3, combine C3 and 4 together. Because they're the same tool, just implemented different ways. So that would cover that. And then the other one that got a, I'm trying to, that, and I'm going to say move. The other one that got 1 vote is sub-area planning. So there's that sub-area planning theme popping up again. And that's when I'm wondering if somehow you keep bringing up sub-area planning, but it's always the same theme. So I'm wondering if we find one place to talk about that, okay? Not repeat it per se. So that might be a way to deal with this one, is to, because let's see, that's one that you were talking about, the last grouping sort of maybe still being on the list a little, to look at a little bit more. So we could potentially combine sub-area planning to say that's an important issue, but it also includes affordability when it's being looked at. So that might be a way to do that. And
Arthur, one quick question. Maybe
Yes.
maybe the commission can help me out with this. So when we're talking about sub-area, when the people who are interested in the sub-area part, what is specifically with regards to housing strategy are we narrowing that in on?
I'm looking at that right now, so that
I guess, is there something that,
there's very, I mean, again, this listed Canyon, if you look at the write-up, it lists Canyon Park again. So I think this is a holdover from the, where sub-area planning was in the old strategy plan. And if you notice, it almost ended in every section. So this is probably an area we didn't maybe clean it up as good as we could have. And we listed it in several subcategories. So that's why I'm saying, given the conversation you had under, sub-area planning, we could just add, as part of sub-area planning, there's also, it's about housing, including affordable housing, and do it that way. So that's a thought. And again, this is, I don't know who's one vote put this in here. If they want to add more, I mean, whoever put that vote up there, want to express why they put that there.
I don't know who put it up there, but yeah, it is, I guess it is a way of breaking down the city into areas that may be different from one another and addressing them accordingly.
Right.
So, but that wasn't, I didn't put that up there, so I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so what did we get with regards to, the consolidation of votes, or how did it?
Well, that's why I'm trying to see. One I got covered in another category.
I see.
So I'm sort of asking the question on this one, if this could be consolidated into one strategy about sub-area planning and have it say it's about housing, including affordable housing? Or do you want to keep it, whoever had that want to keep it called out? Is it,
I think it's fine to consolidate that.
okay, all right, so we'll consolidate this one.
What was that?
Okay, I was just doing all the ones who did, I did all the,
Yes.
That should equal 34. There's 6 points, right, per person? Is the right-hand number the points?
that's what I'm trying, if,
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to ask. I'm looking at David right now.
Yeah, I don't think those numbers are right, because that, I think it only equals
I think you
25
gave 3
points.
points if it was a number 1. Is that what you did? So this got
Right.
1 vote, and it was a number 1 vote, so it's
Sorry,
3
yeah,
total if you give a number 1,
You're
3.
right, it's
Right. This one got 2 number 1s, so it got a 6. And then this one got the highest because it got 2 1s, so that's,
It's just there's 28 points there instead of 30. There should be 30 points total.
oh, you're a high math guy. You're a fast math guy.
I was saying 25.
Actually, I think the
David
right-
has the right number, but it should be 30 points because it's 6 points per person.
I'm not sure how much it would affect it, but yeah, it should add up to.
Oh, that's because, no, 2 plus 1, 4,
Maybe not.
6,
Maybe not everybody voted 3 times.
6, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. I like. I'm seeing 3 of every color.
Oh, yeah, this should be 4.
Okay.
4 points on.
Okay. So now, so what we've kind of done is I'm going to, since we're moving these 2, I'm going to go like that. I'm trying to help you. And so we got, right, we got this one. So now we have allow a range of housing types and densities. And we have surplus public land. I might argue that, trying to see how C1 sort of feels a little bit like your earlier conversation about innovative forms of housing. And does it somehow stand out on an affordability provision? So this was around the idea, okay, so here's a question. You just had a conversation about innovative forms of housing. And in there we had cottages, modular housing. Under affordability, it was rooming, right, boarding homes. Your examples are boarding homes, single room occupancy, tiny apartments, okay? So those aren't explicitly affordable, but because of what they are very affordable forms of market rate housing. So one question would be, should this potentially, those examples I just gave you, be added to the one we had in the earlier section, where we had cottages and things like that, and make that a longer list of ideas? Or do you want to keep the 2 separate?
So, and just at this point, sorry to, so working, because it looks like there is one that sets it apart from the other ones. I mean, do we need to be consolidating a lot more at this point, or is it just more helpful for going forward, or?
We don't have to. I just saw that this one, which got some interest, has a lot of the same concepts that got the interest for the other kinds of housing, you know, when we did it earlier. Where the other was, well, they're both kind of they're both regulatory. It's just one is more, I don't know, more single, I don't know. One might be more ownership and one might be more rental. So that's just a thought that it popped in my head. You can keep them separate. I don't have an issue with it.
I'd be okay, I guess, with consolidating that into the other one that you're referring to.
That would be,
Yeah.
that was innovative, regulatory flexibility for innovative housing, B6.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to consolidate this one.
You have a comment? Okay.
you have surplus land was your next one that got a couple of number 2 votes. And so right now you had the 3, you got a 4th, and I would, well, no, I'll stop there. And then your next one down would be the surplus land, and again, that was both faith-based and, public and nonprofit type properties.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at there is fine. I don't know if there's any further consolidation. I think we should just
Right.
go with those
Yeah.
numbers.
Okay, so this one. And is there any push for any of the other ones on there to sort of be above that line?
I'm not seeing any heads
Okay.
going.
Okay.
Yep, I think that's good.
All right.
I mean, they'll all be on the list. They may just
Yes.
be a little,
Yeah,
that
right.
line is
Yep.
just a kind of a,
And we may, in the end, even for the ones that get lower, we still may do the final, well, let me ask the question. Would it be helpful for the final matrix to be in the order so that it is clear that they are in some type of relative order when we do the full matrix in the end?
Sure.
yes.
Okay, all right. So now we have section D.
Well, actually, Arthur, before
Yes.
you go into that.
Yes.
Could you pause for a moment? I was going to take this, we've had a couple people in the public.
Yes.
Would it be okay if I just?
Okay,
Okay, we're going to take this opportunity for people in the public to, who want to come speak with regards to this topic. And please state your name and address, and if you could, hold your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is Sarah Sundin. I live at 2322. My name is Sarah Sundin. I live at 23225 3rd Avenue Southeast. And my comment is relative to the development of 240th. But prior to saying that, I am sitting in the audience and feeling very anxious because of the Growth Management Act that directed how we were to proceed, and that was 20 years ago. And you're working hard at refocusing your goals, and we always need fresh focus. But it's unsettling to realize that those of us in the sub-planning in the Canyon Park area have been essentially put on the back burner until now. And we are seeing rapid development. And that rapid development is contributing to significant traffic on 240th, making it difficult to access 240th from 3rd Avenue. Currently, there's a proposal that a 90 units be placed on the back of Country Village. And it is proposed, or we are assuming that those 90 units will be flushed out onto 240th, which is currently a narrow, frankly, a very narrow road. And it would be my suggestion that before those structures are built on the back of Country Village, the 240th be built, be redesigned, be constructed, whatever you can possibly do to make it a safer bypass between Bothell Everett Highway and Meridian. It has become, with the congestion that has occurred on 425, on 405, it has become a very congested bypass between Bothell Everett Highway and Meridian, or Pontius, whichever you call it. And that is my concern, because we are anticipating even more traffic if that structure is permitted to be built, or those structures are permitted to be built on the back of Country Village. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sundin. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments?
No, well, just one quick comment.
Yes.
Having been in a similar position as you of a concern that's impacting my neighborhood and my comings and goings, knowing that just a recommendation, an encouragement to bring this concern before City Council during their open comment time.
Okay. And when will that,
Those are Tuesdays?
those are Tuesdays. We were debating whether, was it last night or tonight?
Well, it got canceled last night because they had illness rampage the dais. But it is helpful for us to hear this and to know what people are going through. I think this is something that they're talking more directly about. So I would just encourage you to go before City Council and make your comments there too. And they're a friendly bunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Katie Kerrigan. I live at 23205 3rd Avenue. I'm her neighbor. Follow up to that, and it could be more pertinent to bring this up to City Council, but just with the potential development there, questions regarding some of the conversations around rezoning. More of just a comment as someone who moved to Bothell to have space out of Seattle. It's a bit of a concern to see, one, with the prices increasing obviously everywhere, but to make a substantial investment kind of towards the beginning of my time, hopefully in Bothell, and then to quickly see rapid changes is a bit of a concern. But specifically with that road where we are expecting that development to pop out onto 240th, it is offset from the light. So one of my questions is how is that city planning going to be redesigned on that road so that you don't have two lights about 50 feet apart from each other? Or are those folks coming out of the condominiums not going to have a light, and they're also going to be dealing with what we're dealing with on 3rd Avenue, where we just have to kind of sit and wait, especially with Meridian, that four-way stop, that's also very congested. So I didn't know if roundabouts are being considered or anything like that, but more questions around like how is it actually going to come together in that redevelopment. And then I also this is my first meeting coming to, so I just also had kind of a basic question. I was more curious as to when you guys are looking at all of these various topics and I'm sure all the information that you receive, just wondering what considerations or what inputs you look at when placing your votes. I assume it's not just personal opinion, that there's data that's being collected behind your decisions as we're making these votes. So I just didn't know if you could give a little bit of background as to how you guys go about that.
Yes, good question. So we do get a lot of, we do have many meetings over, so that we went over, we had the update here, I guess, when did it end, last year, 2 years ago? I guess it was last year. And so they broke out the sub areas, and at that point in time, I believe that was when maybe the Country Village, at least with regards to this issue, that's when they talked about a rezone for that area to meet the GMA requirements.
And what is GMA? Sorry.
Sorry. It's a Growth Management Act. It's a
Okay.
state requirement that's put on. It has certain levels for certain cities, and there was time for public input on the sub area plans with regards to the rezones. But we got a lot of information from staff on that. So basically, with regards to how other commissioners decide on it, I think we all try to listen to the community. We love when people like yourselves come take time to come down here. I know it is a lot of time to come down here and listen to the meetings, but we listen to that, and then we also listen to recommendations from community development, and they have a ton of data on the back end with regards to traffic and where they see the future of growth and walkability. And I don't know if there's any other people on the commission you want to chime in. But, so they do bring with it a lot of data. It's not just some of it is our opinions, but we try to listen to what is brought forth as well as the community concerns.
Okay. And then just for both Sarah and I, in terms of any concerns regarding that potential development and the status and any additional input, would just meeting with city council on Tuesdays be the best forum for that?
And there also is I don't know where it stands on that particular topic, but there is a public comment period, and there should be, I think there is, got driven by it, there's a notice,
Yep.
and it has the number on it
Okay.
of the particular, and so there are hearings.
Okay.
I don't know if
I'll
it's
walk
closed
down
on
there
that.
to see
Eric?
that.
That's probably the way to most quickly hone in on that specific project, is to comment under the public notice specifically for that. And I don't know where that's at either, but they do typically do a posting, a mailing, and an ad in the newspaper to solicit public comment on those specific projects.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
One real quick note. Thanks for your guys' comments tonight. I live in the area, so I definitely know your concerns with regards to traffic on 240th. In addition to the posting, Dave, is there someone that they can get in touch with at the city that's either in charge of the traffic side of that project or might be able to provide some more details before the next council meeting?
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out that I think it's likely that the public comment period for that particular project has already passed, but staff will still take comments on projects all through the review process. So you can contact our main number here at 425-806-6400, and then explain what your particular issue is, and then you'll get directed to the right staff person.
Thanks.
Rather than calling out all the staff that's working on that. I'm not exactly sure which staff are assigned to that particular project. But for example, on the traffic, the issues about the traffic light, then you'll want to talk to the traffic engineer that does development review.
Yeah, I'm also in that area. I'm on West Hill and have been here about 10 years. And as some probably recall, 240th was upgraded in connection with the Safeway project at the intersection there, that they upgraded all the way to Meridian. And there were traffic studies done at the time, and they upgraded half of it. And during the Safeway project, it was a conditional use process, so there was actually a public hearing where, to actually approve the project. I don't know if that's going on for this particular project, but there are, if that is a conditional use permit process, there's another would be another hearing to kind of give testimony. And it just comes down to, Bothell has regulation on roads, collector roads, and they do traffic studies, and there's opinions on that, and that's really when the decision's made, so.
Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak tonight? Thank you so much for your comments. We really do appreciate it when the public comes down. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And hopefully we've answered some of your questions tonight.
And I'd also, given how this is different than what you were specifically asking about, what we're doing here tonight, just to give a little context for them and anyone listening, is this is a housing strategy. The commission, in terms of background, we spent several meetings in which we provided them a lot of data related to housing issues in the community. They had a panel of housing developers, nonprofit, as well as for-profit developers come and talk to them about issues. We've done about half a dozen focus groups where we went out to the faith community, the seniors. Let's see, who else did we go to? Human service agencies, where we've talked to people in the community about housing issues. And then right now there's a housing survey online. If you go to the city's website, where we're asking, anyone can provide input. So these are all different forms of input that the commission's been receiving. And just to sort of clarify, what they're doing in this exercise with this plan is they're not making decisions on what will be changed in the city. What they're trying to do is essentially lay out a work plan for things that probably are most needed to be looked at. And as each one of those are taken up, that's where you heard earlier where the council put it on the work program, each one of those items will go through a similar process where there will be opportunity for input from the community on that specific topic area. Okay? What's the time frame for this work plan? Is this like a 5-year? Around 3 years or so, right.
Oh, and there is, just one little last note, there is an Imagine Bothell notice that you can sign up for that comes out monthly. I'm not, can't remember the person's email address offhand, but if you can look into that, and it's sent into your email box monthly, and it has a breakdown of basically all the topics that are facing Bothell, or you can refer back and forth to the website. But it's a pretty good synopsis of what's going on.
So you just saw on the screen there, if you go open up the City of Bothell webpage, there's the link to the housing survey.
And if you don't see it on the banner here, it's located on the Planning Commission page for now. It'll probably move to a page of its own when it goes to City Council. But that will take you to this informational page about the housing strategy. Oh, and then a link to the survey there. So I would encourage you to take that survey, and anybody who's listening in on BCTV to do so as well.
Correct. No, we'll just, you might want to write on those.
The overall housing strategy.
They consolidate to remind them.
Okay, great. Arthur, with that, can you take us into the fourth and
Yes.
final part?
Yes. So on this next section, excuse me, under special needs, and same thing, we have put this up here, but again, we've only included those that got some level of vote on the first time. So those are all the ones that are white on the second page of attachment 1. And there you can see we drew the line there pretty far down because we were looking at votes. You know, we had 3 at 6 and 5. You know, so that was pretty close in their point tally. So again, you can either talk your way through this one, or if you want, we just got it set up in case you wanted to do some kind of voting exercise or not. So whichever way works best for you.
Any comments from the commissioners on that question? Commissioner Swartz?
D8 seems to be pretty significant special needs housing, but I'm wondering if I'm looking at aging in place, housing and services for low-income seniors, and special needs housing. Is there any combination that we could put some of those categories together? Or is that just a little bit too broad?
So just as a little history for you, you're right, you have probably more strategies for seniors than most cities, and that's because when you wrote your first comprehensive plan back in the early 90s, you had like 10 pages out of 30 in the housing element on senior housing. So it was a really big thing, and so it was always really heavily emphasized. And so because we worked from your old strategy plan, that's why there's so many for seniors. And that just sort of came to my mind as you asked the question. I'd forgotten that one, you know, and I remember way back
Well,
then.
we had a lot of seniors then, and we still do.
Yeah, right. So I'm
that's-
just letting you know the
right.
history of why you have so many broken out is because that's the one area of your comprehensive plan many years ago. So to your question, would it be possible to consolidate any of that? A little bit, I defer to you, but I think what I would distinguish is that D2, when I read the examples sort of help give you a clue often, is, well, actually the last two are a little bit different, but are kind of, isn't about aging in place. Whereas aging in place is about being able to stay in your house.
Right.
So those are two pretty, somewhat distinct ideas. Housing and services for low-income seniors. Actually, that feels like a subset of D2, potentially.
Well, it just seems that there's a little bit of overlap when you talk about special needs housing
Yes,
and aging in place,
yes,
that some of those things can be similar.
correct. That's true, too, yes.
But I guess the distinction is that special needs housing is for special needs of all age groups. It's not focused on seniors.
That's true.
So I think
true.
there are seniors with special needs, but that's why it's a separate issue.
And special needs housing is probably also referring to like group homes and,
Right. In other words,
Right.
you can have a group home that is serving seniors or serving people with disabilities. So from that point of view, there can be overlap. The point of D8 is that there are services that go with certain populations, and that's calling out, supporting, finding ways to support those organizations. So from that point of view, it's pretty unique on that side.
I'm actually looking at this, and I mean, my comment would be, I guess, I don't see that it needs a lot of tweaking. I think it's pretty much okay as it is.
I would agree with that.
I agree as well.
Okay? Would,
So I
Now-
guess with that, it looks, oh, go ahead.
okay. I'm trying to be respectful of the question that was asked, and because someone had special needs housing. D7 is services and for seniors, and D8 is services for other populations that need support. And one question might be whether or not, and I know often, like when you do your human services funding, they're probably getting requests for both. Now, one might say, so whether or not you want to treat the services as something that gets a little bit consolidated to call out special needs, that, to your earlier question, I just put it out there, or not. We called it out so you could distinguish the two. The question is, they're both the services that go with supporting people to be in housing.
And that was D7 and D8?
Yes.
Okay.
So D7 was above the line, and then D8 is the one that was just below the line, and who obviously voted for it had it as a top priority.
So you're kind of thinking like housing and services for low-income seniors and/or special needs?
Right, in other words, something that would sort of say, it's, look at providing, well, actually, 7 is, I'm actually reading 7 a little more closely. It says, or services and facilities. So both of those are sort of saying, look to ways to support the groups who are, especially for lower income, and people, especially lower income seniors. If there are people who are trying to make that happen, you should try to find ways to support that. These are both support. And so so they feel like they're asking to do the same thing, but they're calling out two different populations to do similar things for.
is D7 too different from D2?
That's why I was saying originally I could see D7 being a subset of D2.
Right.
But what's a little bit different is that in D2, like the senior housing overlay has nothing to do with low income. It's seniors. D7 is specifically calling out, and if they're doing it for lower income seniors, that's a good thing too, and explicitly, because that might be taking a little bit, whereas the other's just being built by the market. If there's a group that's out there who's trying to serve lower income, very similar, it's a subset of D2, but calling out those who are trying to support lower income. Special needs are almost always lower income when they're getting support services, just universally. So that's why I'm saying, to me, D6 and 7 are sort of calling out for those who are really reaching out and trying to do housing and facilities, they said, for special needs, the housing and the services, are you paying attention and trying to find ways to support those kind of efforts in the community? And so it could be, that's going to be more like funding or supporting their applications for funding to other, when they apply to funding for the county, you would support their efforts to do that, or you might, like the Housing Trust Fund, say we want to use some of those funds to help support that for the capital. And our human services funding, have a little bit of the money be used for this kind of support to the groups doing that.
Versus D2, if you don't mind me jumping in, which is more land use oriented.
Right. A little bit more so.
I like the idea of grouping D7 and D8 together and maybe keeping that at the same priority level as D7 currently as number 3, I guess. And then other than that, I think I like the order.
Yeah, I guess that, and I think it does work not perfectly together, but well enough together. And there was a person who voted for it, and it was their top choice, I guess, 3 votes. And then I'm not quite sure, so we do have the homeless issue then below it that we haven't talked about. But I'm okay with, if that's moving on to another topic, I guess. But if everybody's okay with that, I'm okay with consolidating those 2 things as suggested.
Right. And
Okay, great.
Keep
thanks.
in mind, you do have coordinate homeless and housing and services as D13 above the line. So you do have homelessness. Again, we had a couple
Oh,
different.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. You're right.
And D11 also addresses that a little
Right.
bit, doesn't it?
That's right.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, wait, one quick question. I think there was a good point by a couple of people around me about consolidating the homeless, or the D9 and D13.
Let me make sure that.
Was that what you guys were thinking?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, making the list more manageable. Let's look at what they say, I guess.
So what I would clarify is distinguishment, and so that for those of us who look at this more frequently, so D9 is where you're sort of saying, we, the city, might use some of our resources or do zoning to make sure that homeless housing might occur in our community, and we might affect that by some of our zoning provisions. So that's saying support the development with on-site service. So that's sort of saying we might be supporting stuff in the community. D13, is it 13, right? Is saying there's a big regional effort out there, and we should coordinate. So if we are doing something locally, we should maybe coordinate, if it's local, make sure it fits into that overall system. Maybe we should pay attention to the regional conversation and maybe provide input to the regional conversation, because a lot of the planning and funding for homelessness is done at a more regional level. So that's the distinguishment between the two. We could combine those together, but I just want to make sure you understand why we had 2 separate boxes there. Second one, be involved at the regional level conversation, and then the second one is, and allow stuff to land in our community, and do things to allow some solutions as appropriate land in our community.
Maybe D13 fits better with D7 and D8.
I was gonna, let's see,
D7,
D9 would go closer to D7 and D8, I think.
Well, D7 and D8 are talking about assisting other entities with their efforts. D13 is also talking about supporting efforts by government and health and social service organizations. So they're all 3 talking about assisting other entities.
So D9 would, in my mind, is very similar to 7 and 8. It's just, we're distinguishing 3 different populations. We got seniors, we got special needs, and then the third is homeless. Because, again, the city isn't typically doing it directly. They are supporting those in your community doing it. So if you're not reading it that way, then we did a bad job drafting.
I
13 is meant
agree.
to be sort of the regional conversations for the planning and organizing and setting the system up.
I agree with Commissioner Clark. D13 seems to fit with D7 and D8 as more of a regional, other groups are involved. If your intent, as you just mentioned, D9 was specifically on Bothell and what the city would do itself. I don't get that feeling when I read D78 to D30.
It may just be an issue of rewording
That's what I'm saying.
what
That's what
you're
I'm
saying.
saying.
If your intent, if we're misreading what you intended, then
Yeah.
I would go along with what your intent was.
Right, and the reason why I feel that way is if you look at 13, and it says, provide support for efforts such as All Home to develop a coordinated regional approach. All Home is the planning organization that gets everyone's input and decide, okay, we should do this kind and this kind and this kind, and then everybody tries to go make that happen. So that's why I see 13 as more the planning, and 9 is, now we're going to support some specific initiatives that would be in Bothell.
It's a little more vague than D7 and D8, so if we could make it clear that D9 is supporting other organizations, I think that I'd be,
I agree we need to add it, but
Okay.
right.
Great. Does anybody else have any other questions on that particular section? Special needs and senior housing? I don't see any. Okay.
And in doing that, so did you end up saying, let's put 7, 8, and 9 together?
I think so.
I think I heard that suggestion. I didn't know if the group,
I think that's what we intended.
okay?
Yes.
Okay, just want to be sure. Okay. So now, what Mike's been doing over here, those are all your top from the 4 sections, now all put together in one place. I don't know how this is going to work, but we'll see. We'll give you guys a try at this. And especially because you're missing 2 commissioners tonight, this is definitely a first cut at this, I think. And this is now saying we now have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We probably have close to 20 that are sort of filtering up individually through the subsections. Now it becomes, now here is the top, right? It's sort of like the playoffs now. And now what we're sort of saying is, amongst all of these are all now we're going to say are important. But now it's kind of like, do some of these really rise to the top as amongst these you think are particularly important?
And Arthur, with that, because I'm glad you mentioned the other 2 commissioners not being able to be here. And so I guess wherever we go with this discussion tonight, if we do narrow it down, I'd like to be included in the packet for next time so that the other commissioners would be in on this, whatever we narrow it down to 3 to 5.
I think I would be proposing that this will be a call-out section.
Okay.
And to be completely revisited.
I think that's,
Yes.
I would recommend that maybe we wait until they're all available to address it for the first time. I mean,
Okay.
we've gone a long way. We've taken a significant step here tonight, so
Okay.
I think we should
I'm seeing a lot of,
let them
Okay.
weigh in
yeah,
on that.
Okay.
yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
All right, and then this might be good because for the packet, people will see this and hopefully you'll get some more comment from the public in general.
Yes.
So we can get that. Okay, great. So
Yeah.
that then means, the other thing, I referenced it once before, and it felt like during the conversation, the only thing that explicitly got moved is that the monitoring list looks like it's pretty much intact from before. We made a little bit of change tonight, so we would propose updating that based on some of the comments tonight. So that'll be another thing we want you to, what I would be suggesting is, that's another one, let us clean that up and call out at the meeting next week, have we hit the right things for monitoring?
Did we move ADUs to that monitoring list?
I think I was going to propose.
It
that
sounded like it from hearing from-
regulatory side of it, I was going to put that there. But there was still more to ADUs as to why it's still there, but yes. And there was also the regulatory review that was going to get moved to here, to the monitoring list and stuff. If anyone, if you have any comments right off the bat from looking at that list you want to comment on, we can do that now.
Go ahead. Sorry. Just a quick question. We asked a couple of meetings ago, and I was hoping we could get something put together. not necessarily for tonight, but maybe next time we meet. Which of these are already being monitored, and then how much work it's going to be for staff? So Tom or Dave, I don't know if you guys could provide that. Some of these are a little bit more nebulous, but I think that would be helpful is if we're going to go through and rate them.
Okay, and
Should know.
we don't necessarily have, the monitoring list isn't meant for ranking.
Okay.
The monitoring list is to sort of say, well, you might want to call out a couple, but I think to do that, it's really going to be a workload thing. And so some of these, I think we probably need to sit down with Dave and think through that a little bit, because some of those Arch might be monitoring in behalf of all the cities. We already might be tracking, like especially for production. We track production of multifamily housing, and we know what affordability level it's at and things like that. So that's some of that stuff we're already doing. And now what it might, if you look at that list, did preservation get to this? Is that one of our top ranking ones, preservation? I'm trying to remember if preservation is,
That was on,
I thought it was. Yes, it's at the top for affordability. So you may see like under you'll notice under the monitoring, you have inventory existing housing. If you go to if you go to that attachment for the monitoring list, if you're looking at that, F4. To me, F4 gets moved off monitoring, and because it's a priority strategy, and that would be one of the things being done as that priority strategy. Okay, so that's one where you might see us proposing it come off the list only because it got elevated onto the main strategies, and it's one of I believe it should be one of the examples of what you would do under that strategy. So this is meant to be sort of the outside of this priority strategies, things that we want to call out. Okay, so that was one that I thought, and then the senior housing might be one too, because that rank raised to the top. So those might fall under, they don't need to be under monitoring because they're going to be priority strategies.
Actually, I'm good. I was going to mention if we kept senior housing to add special needs and homelessness to F3, just to monitor those levels. But if it's taken off because we've elevated, then you wouldn't.
Right. I'm not. Those are very important, but I'm saying you're going to be calling out that we need to do that. Okay.
great.
And then the two that you added. So this list won't have a lot of changes, but what we'll try to do is add something here about how are we doing it now already, and if it feels like a lot of work. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. All right. So the last thing is the contents of the outline/contents of a final report. And you can see the way we've done it is we sort of have a body. We're proposing, again, this is a suggestion. We're totally open. Starting on attachment 5, this is attachment 5. You'll notice that what we're trying to do is have in the body of the report some short descriptions on needs and the background of what the process was, local strategies, basic policies, but then not have a lot there, but jump into mostly talking about what were your criteria, et cetera, and then what are the top priorities. And this is where we're saying where we now need to write based on your conversation tonight. And then you'll see there's a section on monitoring, so we'll do some editing of that. And then there's a number of appendices that go into more detail on some of those topics. So we want that main report to focus on your process, at least as we're laying it out right now. And if you have different thoughts, we'll do that. And the top priorities. But then in the appendix, there's more detailed needs analysis. There's all the summary notes from all the focus groups. There's the full monitoring list and things along those lines. So that's sort of our initial thoughts on how to organize all the material.
Yeah, on page 3 of that, it's not a big deal, but just on the graph, there's some asterisks there. Is that just to kind of bring your eyes to?
No, it's because we cut and pasted out a lot of footnotes,
Okay,
and which are probably not needed for something here, so we'd have to get the asterisk out of there. This was a really quick cut and paste job to give you give a feel for what we were thinking of trying to do. And in fact, we're looking at trying to even use less words and more boxes and box text in that document there, so that things jump out, more key findings.
Okay, great. Anybody have any comments on that? Okay. I think we've moved through all the responsibilities for tonight with regards to page 2 there, I guess. So with that, does somebody want to have a motion with regards to continuing the public hearing? Or do you have a question?
Just one last question. Attachment 5, I thought this was all good information. Seemed like the focus was on affordability, which I think is good. I was wondering if we had statistics at what the market demand for housing units in Bothell is now versus the supply as a whole, just to show even independent of affordability, we've got a large demand within Bothell for
So
units. Single
we
family.
do have, I'm looking at page 7, where we have household types. And we also have a little bit on, from an income point of view, percentages of households. And we have salaries of local employees on page 8. So we do have a couple graphs that we had shown you earlier that sort of get at full profile. I mean, when you start looking at that, it leads you to seeing that, but we have tried to show types of households and salaries for local workforce. And then I don't know if that bar chart on page 7, what we could do is add another bar that has like income of existing residents.
I don't want you guys to do any more work. I think what we have here is fine. I was just curious if you tracked overall housing needs within Bothell regardless. So if there's 1,000 people wanting a house or an apartment in Bothell and we have 200 units, kind of that disparity regardless of affordability.
And the best, and that's one reason where you have the salary. I mean, that's a really hard one to sort of give a number. What we have done to give some context to that is look at how many jobs you have and how many housing units result from that, the demand for housing from your workforce. That's the one area we can think of that's a natural cause of demand. But like when we went with the seniors, what was interesting is where they said a lot of the new, it sounded like they were saying more so than in the past, is there's a lot more of the seniors are here not because this is where they've always lived, but because their children have moved here for work and they're following their children. So that's another component of demand that I'm not quite sure how you would measure that per se. So the best of, so we do the workforce, how much there is, so we have that kind of thing. So that's sort of a really hard one to sort of pinpoint what exactly is the market demand. There's things that contribute to demand, and I think that's what we've tried to show you here.
Okay. Make a motion.
Motion to continue the public hearing on this housing strategy update to the next date, which
June
is
28th, is
June
that right?
28th? Yes.
to June 28th.
Second?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And
If you have any more sticky notes that we didn't get, make sure we get them. Is
Sticky
there
notes with
old
writing.
business there today, Dave?
no old business.
Or report? It looks like you want to talk about the planning calendar?
Yeah, there have been some changes, so I just wanted to make sure you knew that. First of all, your calendar in your packet lists the 28th as a tentative date for the continued housing strategy update, but that's definite at this point. As was mentioned earlier, the council meeting last night had to be canceled due to the lack of a quorum. So all of the items that were scheduled for June 6th are being moved to June 13th. So the public hearing on clustering and tree retention and the public hearing on the first part of miscellaneous downtown code amendments, which is one of the items that Planning Commission didn't work on that council kept for itself, the building height measurement method. Are the commissioners that were going to be there for the clustering and tree retentions available to be there next week?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then the study session item, so what happened is a decision was made to split out that height amendment and then bring the other ones back as a study session. That's being moved from the 13th to the 27th. Council's going to have a fourth meeting in June. And on the 20th, that remains the same, the public hearing on downtown parking management. Looking ahead to July, that's still a little bit up in the air. I didn't actually have a chance to get any confirmation from Bruce on the bringing back the PSRC and final plat code amendments, but that'll happen either on the 12th or 19th. And then if we are not able to finish the housing strategy on June 28th, then that could happen on either July 19th or potentially 26th.
I hope we can try to finish that on the 28th. That would be good,
Yeah.
if we can.
So the other thing that's possible on the agenda for July, I'm not sure if we're going to be ready to bring this to you, would be an initial study session on the Canyon Park Regional Growth Center visioning. We're still getting the consultant under contract, and we're not sure we'll be ready for that, but just wanted to clarify that. The other thing is we don't know at this point whether any of these items will be continued on the council calendar, but they are at this point looking at meeting now on July 11th, 18th, and possibly the 25th. So that's the update on the calendar.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any reports from members? We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
All those in favor say aye.
Oh, second.
Aye. Opposed? And we are adjourned.